So I have these in order. I've just sanded these down on the other side. So I fit them together. And it's a very simple pattern. So it's very easy not to lose track and fit them together. The more complicated ones are harder. I have some that I'm doing now that are a bit more complicated. And this one design I kind of like. It's simple and elegant. You know, I tend to like rosettes that are fairly simple and not too colorful and not too flowery. Kind of, you know, I'm kind of conservative that way. I like the old traditional rosettes. I think that some of Torres's original ones are really beautiful. Not to say, you know, people haven't, I mean, some people, you know, blow my mind with rosettes. But it's just not, I'm more interested in the sound of the guitar, and also I think the beauty of the guitar is in the proportions, the balance, everything that kind of comes together, not just a rosette, you know. So, okay. It's kind of a bit too wide to handle, but maybe I'll just do this many here. Just add this one. Okay. It's a little crooked there. Okay, so that's, you can see that, but Let me put the light. That's the pattern, and just because I like to see what it looks like, I'll cut this. Get the burrs off. So that's the pattern. I use this floor wax to prevent the water from, the glue from sticking to the wood and everything in this mold. So I just take some of that and I wipe it on. It won't stick to the melamine, but you know, it doesn't hurt to put it on there. And I have this, and I'll put some on here. It'll squeeze out when you clamp it. So that's that. Alright, so I have this ready to go. And set that aside. And I have some tight bond glue diluted with water. So, and I have these tiles all arranged, prearranged, wrapped up, ready to go. And I just take a toothbrush and spread the glue on there. I'm holding this so that they don't go out of sync. Turn it over. Do the same. Squeeze some of the glue out and do it on the other side here. Okay. Squeeze out any excess glue. Okay. Set that aside. Get some it's a little sticky. Line these up straight. Okay. I set these so there's a little overhang, so I can see everything comes together. Okay. All right. I made this little jig, and they're kind of made for each individual tile size. So, I mean, it's not something that I tend to save. Maybe when this is done I throw it away, this jig, or if it's the same design next time, which I always tend to kind of change my designs because I get bored with the same thing over and over. So it's not something you want to necessarily hang on to. Okay, so you can see the logic of that, right? So next I'm going to clamp this in so that it pushes this together, and then I'm going to clamp down so that it holds it down flat. So I should turn it around here. So I don't tighten these all the way until I get these other clamps tightened, because if you clamp this down, then you won't be able to clamp these. So hopefully it's going to show some glue oozing out. Don't want to do it too much because you'll break this other thing. Okay, so then I tighten these down. Some glue should ooze out now. That's always a good sign. So that's how you do that. I generally leave this clamped for about 5 to 10 minutes because the wood is going to suck up all the glue pretty quickly and set. But you don't want it to harden because you won't be able to pry it all off. It'll break and everything. So I take it out while it's still wet, and you know, they hold together quite well. You know, you take it out, just let it dry on both sides, lean it up against something. Okay, so I've made all these tiles and I've cut them up to the thickness I want the rosette to be in the cylinder when I cut it. More here, so I have a piece of black veneer, 90.9 millimeters thick. And I'm going to spray one side of the veneer because if I apply glue to the other side, it swells up, it cups up, and it's a problem. And I always use on the rosettes, I use Type-On, because when I do heat up the rosettes in the oven and I clamp down with the hose clamps, the whole rosette becomes malleable, and you can compress it really good and everything, you know. So So I was able to probably get I'll probably be able to get about 20 rosettes out of this, what I just cut up. That's pretty cool. Probably another year's worth of rosettes. And then I have another batch that I'm doing. I need to cut this up real quick, hold on. So, this came out, some tape or something on there. This came out perfect. 2 batches of rosettes. So I'm going to do like each one's going to be a little different. So, but with the same theme in the middle. Okay, so I have this on some wax paper. Just fold it over. Now, have I ever said how much I love this stone, this surface stone? This one is like super precise. I have 2 of them, and I really can't live without them. They're just amazing. Anytime you need to true up bones and saddles and nuts and saddles and just about anything, you just put some sticky sandpaper down and it works amazingly good. I use it for all kinds of things. Having one perfectly flat surface in your shop is really great. I have one that's big enough for backs and tops and all kinds of things. So, after I do this, when it dries, I'll take it out. And when I make the rosette, I will bend this into a circle on a hot iron. And having that back veneer, that back side will hold it all in place so it's easy to bend. Just do it on one side, don't do it on both sides. Do it on the outside curve of the rosette. So after I cut these out on the CNC, glue 2 of them together to make a wide piece. I just put some dabs of crazy glue in here and just put them together. I also just put some shellac on here because I don't want, I want the rosette not to stick. And then I put some wax, floor wax here, and work it into all the little cracks and crevices here. And this will prevent the rosette from gluing itself to this form, to the circle here. So, really important when time comes to get these things off of here, slice them up and get them off. They just pop right off. So, that's that. So I made this little platform to build the rosette on. And I again here coat this thing with some floor wax, so that it, there is in focus, so that it, all the glue won't stick to it. And that holds this in place as I'm wrap these veneers around here and build up the rosette. Then when you're finished, you just take it off. So first I'm going to trim these veneers by just wrapping them around. And just marking it. What I do with these on this side, I squirt some water on here because as soon as we put some glue on one side, it's going to start to warp because it swells the wood on one side, so it makes it easier to work with. Spray a little on here on both sides, and we'll glue it up. Good. I'd rather they're not, it doesn't need to be, perfect under there for obvious reasons. So I got all these things ready to go, kinda. And I like these hose clamps that have the quick adjust thing where you can lift it up and move it and then clamp it down. The other kind I don't like. That snaps up, pull it, snap down, like that. Important to get these things even on here so it doesn't exert pressure unevenly. And you kind of just need like 2 on there. So just with this first set of veneers on here, wrapping it around, you don't really need to stick it in the oven, but later when you get a bunch of them on there and then you're kind of you put on that central tile part, then you need to really clamp it down and cook it up in the oven, heat it up and let the glue melt, and keep tightening these clamps, and it will all kind of mush together really nicely. There won't be any gaps if you heat it and tighten it. So what I'm going to do now is get a toothbrush and some water and just clean the glue off of here. So I don't think I need to show people how to do that. It's pretty easy to figure that out. This is the central motif, I guess you call it. And I'm going to bend it. First I'm going to put some water on this side, just so it helps a little bit. So I just want to bend this around, and this is really easy to bend because the all of the little tiles have Type-on glue in there, and they just kind of melt with the heat, so it's quite easy. Okay, so there we have it. Okay, so I cheated a little. I went ahead and put on another layer without videotaping it. Stuck it in the oven and kind of burned it a little bit. I forgot about it. But anyways, it's okay, no big deal. Nice and toasty. So, okay, put this on here. And my arrow points here, but I think the center is here. This is kind of the easy part here. Because once this sets, it really holds. I had to boil these C-clamps in water to get all the glue off of them. I've had them for years. Keep meaning to go by an auto supply store and get some new ones, but I always forget. Because once I'm finished making rosettes, I'm kind of done with it for a while. I don't want to do it again for a while. Okay, so what we have here is a little bit more than half done. What I like to do is, once I put on this center tile, I like to sand it down on the belt sander. Get it all cleaned up so I can kind of see what's going on, and it looks good, I think. So now I'll put on the other two, maybe two more applications, and then we're done. Yeah, I'm quite happy with how it's come out. So what I've done here is I've glued on 4 little spacers with some scrap wood, and the reason I did that is when you it raises it off the surface of this little platform, and the reason is because these pieces are these veneers I want to be flush on this side and can go down a little bit on this side, because as you put these on, they invariably they kind of twist and create a problem. So you end up losing the tiles here, and subsequently a rosette or two. So anyway, I like to put a little riser on there. So at this point, I just like to clean it up a little bit while it's, I put this in the oven and it's cooling down. Once it cools, the glue usually is hardened. So I thought I'd just clean it up in the meantime. And the problem here is, you know, with the chisel, don't take it all the way down even, because the grains on these veneers are going all different directions and you end up tearing it out. So just get it kind of close. And then I clean it up again on the belt sander. One thing I neglected to mention that's really important is when it's kind of hard to explain at this point. When you glue these tiles onto in my case, a black veneer, as you compress these clamps, there's a gap in here, so this will tend to just like flatten out, and then these things get under heat, they just melt and they deform. The solution to that is at this point to cut out a little kind of V and make a wooden replacement the same thickness as the rosette, but actually the same the thickness from the inner veneer to the tile. So I hope I'm explaining this correct. So when you go to tighten these tile, just the tile up to the point of the tile, you have a spacer in here that's wedged in there tight, and when you clamp this down, it won't squish these little tiles, these few tiles here on the ends, down. The alternative to that is to actually, before you bend this on the heating iron, to put some crazy glue at the end of this tile and the veneer to lock it in. Then just put a bead of crazy glue in there, maybe a couple beads, and then you squirt some accelerator on there, and it'll lock this in the same way as a wedge would do. Really important to do that, because if you start heating this up and crunching it down, then it's going to deform, and the rosette is going to come out thinner here, all in this area, and thicker here. So something very important to do that I forgot to mention. But if you don't do it, you'll screw it up. This is why I like these quick release lock screw hose clamps, because you can quickly adjust them, and in this situation it's really helpful. I guess I could get a speed drill and do this, but I'm just old-fashioned. Make sure it's sitting down flush. And after this, I'll go and again just clean. Go in the kitchen sink and turn on the hot water, get it nice and hot with a toothbrush, and I clean all this glue off so the whole thing is all wet. And then I stick it in the oven. I just turn it up all the way and bake it for about 10 minutes. It gets nice and hot. The glue will start to bubble out, and at that point you can tighten these down even more because the whole rosette at that point becomes malleable. Just put some aluminum foil in there so that the glue doesn't drip down inside the oven. You know, that happened last night, and my wife, Ganya, she came in the shop, says, "You're trying to kill me with this smell," you know, and burning glue, tight bond and wood does not smell good. It doesn't smell like chocolate chip cookies, you know. So be careful about that. So okay, I'm gonna go and clean this up and stick it in the oven, and then we're done. I'll sand it down and I'll show you the final result. So I'm just taking off this excess here, and we'll go down and sand this even on the belt sander, and we're done. People say they want to see me do a video on slicing these into rosettes, and I think I'll do that this time. I have to bring my camera down in the dusty room. There's a Buddhist story of how do you tell a good chef, a good cook. You look at the how many fingers he has left, and I think it's the same true with a good woodworker. If you haven't lost a finger, then you're probably pretty mindful and a good woodworker. Good guitar maker, I should say. So I'm going to go down there and sand it, and I'll be right back. So here it is, the finished product. if I'm lucky, I'll get out of this one maybe 9, 10. I'm really lucky, a little more, but I tend to like to make them a little thicker and conservative. If you go too thin, and then you just end up ruining a bunch of them. So I'm going to put a little shellac on here just to bring out the color more. I don't know if it shows up on the video, but what it would look like under a finish. Yeah, I like it. Okay, so that's how to do that. And I will make a video when I inlay it into the top, because I don't know what other people do. I've never read a guitar making book for 40 years, and like Irving Sloan and Art Overholzer were the only books I ever read. And so I don't know how other people do it, but when I inlay this into the top, I use a hot iron, and I cut the channels the ring into the top really tight, and then I get a hot iron, and I heat up the rosette, and it becomes malleable again, and then it just kind of, you can work it into the as the inlay into the top. So, but I'll do that on a whole nother video. It's kind of interesting, I think. But you know, I did it before. You can look through my YouTube channel and find it somewhere too. But I'll do a new one. So I'm making a different set of tiles here for a different design rosette, and I cut these thinner just because the design kind of calls for it. And what I do is I cut them out on the bandsaw really thin. They come out to be 0.85, and then I've created this little sanding kind of jig here that I glue on a piece of the thickness of one of the tiles, and then I have my trusty surface stone, and I just sand these. And so this thing on the back here, the elevated height of the tile keeps this all level, and keeps you from going like this, you know. So this is how I thin them down. The problem with these is I use some maple for the white color and black, and if you don't, if you go all in grain, and when you go to sand the rosette, a lot of the dark black or whatever dark colors are going to get absorbed into the in grain of the white wood and look terrible. So you have to go the white with the grain, and that poses tons of problems. It's really very difficult to make these thin rosette tiles without breaking because the black go on the end grain, but the white go with the grain. So if there's too much white in these designs in each tile, it's like they're really weak, and any kind of pressure on them will break them. They'll chip, they'll do all kinds of terrible things. And it's just a real pain in the ass to do it this way, but there is really no other way to do it. Otherwise it looks terrible. So the only other thing is to make thicker rosette tiles so they have more strength. Now the other thing is when you do too much white, when you apply the glue and it dries, this part warps will pull the tile this way, and the black is going this way, and it will resist, and so you get these bowed pieces, and they may seem unusable, but they're not. You can use them because they're so flexible. When you glue them down, it's no problem. So yeah, this one is more difficult to make. It's actually thinner than the other design I just completed, and it's just more more of a problem. But I really like this design. I think this is the classic Ramirez 1912 guitar or something like that. Like I said, I always liked traditional, established designs. You know, I think on anything. You know, like even the shape of the guitar. You know, we all copy Torres. You can't really improve much on that design, that shape, the proportions, all that. So then what happens, excuse me, is these get a little fuzz on from the end grain. And I just take a little super fine, like 320 sandpaper, and just burnish off those little that little burr of end grain wood there. And so these are quite time consuming. You've got to get yourself into a almost I wouldn't call it meditation, but it's kind of like you kind of set this day aside for doing rather mundane tasks, but it's the little tasks that end up contributing to the overall thing. So you can't neglect these little details. So I just I have to psych myself into the right frame of mind to do these, because I didn't like the empty cup in the photo. Okay, we're rolling. So I'll suck my stomach in now. So Eric is here and he's filming. I'm bending the herringbone to get ready to wrap around the rosette.
How do you keep it from breaking? That's what I'd always be afraid of.
Yeah, it's pretty flexible because the herringbone, oh, an important thing I forgot to tell everybody is that the herringbone is glued together with Gorilla Glue, a non-water based glue. And that's one reason it survived through the sander pretty well, because that sander will heat up the wood as it goes through, and usually like Titebond will melt and it'll get a really bad buildup in the sandpaper. So when you do any kind of herringbone or wheat pattern, anything where you're gonna sand it and bend it, I always use Gorilla Glue, polyurethane glue. So see this, if this were Titebond, it would it'd be you could do it, but it would be difficult because it
if it was Titebond and you were kind of pushing it, would the pieces delaminate?
They would delaminate, exactly.
They'd come off the backer strip.
They'd start to delaminate.
I see. Well,
so the Gorilla Glue prevents that from happening. The Gorilla Glue can endure really, really high temperatures without affecting it.
So it looks like it's behaving pretty well.
See? I told you.
Yeah, it's...
I've done this 100 times. So it'll just wrap around. No problem. Is that too close? Is it going out of focus or anything?
No, it looks like it's okay.
Huh.
I'm just trying to get over it to show that little detail at the end there.
Yeah, so then I hold it round like that until it cools down, and when it cools it'll kind of stay in that position.
Do you ever get it tighter than that to get it closer to where you're gonna, or is that tight enough that you can
yeah, it's tight enough for when you put the hose clamps on and clamp it down.
I see.
It'll be fine.
No, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Good.
Oops.
Oh, come on, gun. Speaking of the devil, she's here. Huh? We were just speaking of Gandhi, right? She just drove up. That means she's going to live a long life.
Is that what that means? That's amazing.
If you talk about somebody and they come, that means that they're going to live a long life.
So, well, the screw head or this part here where the screw is at the junction, otherwise it could dent the.
Yeah, exactly. It can dent up here all at once, but you can't put it on the actual, because that's going under the fingerboard.
Right. So it can be a little messy there, but.
Yeah. I know it would speed up if I had a drill, but
That's okay, you're old school.
I'm old school. Some things, you know. CNC.
I think you probably started developing this technique before electric drills that were okay for screwing things and had clutches, before all that was invented.
Yeah.
So you're just doing what you started with.
Yeah. And already I've run into a little bit of a problem here. I want to cut these. They're meshing too much, and it's not allowing it to.
It's too much overlap.
Yeah, there's too much overlap. So I'm gonna just quickly trim it off from the bandsaw. No big deal. Let's see.
Okay, so this is looking much better because you're.
That's better. I don't care if there's a gap there.
No.
And I don't care if it touches, because you got to cut through that anyway at the end when you inlay the rosettes. So
Looks like it's a lot easier to handle when
yeah,
when it's not too big, too
that's
long.
true. That's true. This is how Torres did it, actually.
Did he? He didn't have ring clamps, right? I mean, did he? Did he use some other form, or did he actually have ring clamps like this?
I'm just joking.
Oh, I see. See, I've got to watch you every step of the way. I would have believed you.
I know.
Except I was thinking that, you'd say that he had rawhide or something that, specially treated to release, and he could have spun that for quite a long ways.
Yeah.
So you're pushing the pieces so that they're more parallel,
Yeah, so that there's even.
sliding them back and forth. Right?
Yeah. And so there's even clamping pressure all around.
So this will be the base. And do you put this in the oven now, or do you add a few more layers?
The only reason I would put it in the oven now is just to heat it up and have it dry faster.
Let me see.
Because these veneers, when you clamp them, they're tight. They're heating them up isn't going to make them more malleable. But as you start to build up the rosette, it becomes less and less manageable with the So at this point,
Okay,
I'll show you. I just
So this looks pretty, I don't know, pretty gnarly, but it's going to end up being an incredibly beautiful thing.
it cleans up beautifully,
Yeah.
like I do.
I won't show your face.
Oh,
This is the scientific part here.
I'll just clean it up like that.
Now, is this partly so that the clamping screws don't get full of glue and you can get them apart?
That, and also it just when you go to glue on the next veneers, you want this as clean as possible.
Right.
And also, if there's a bunch of glue buildup, it takes longer to dry on these edges because this glue, it's built up like this. It'll take days to dry, but if it's a super thin coat, it'll dry in an hour.
Right.
So I just get off any excess glue I can off of there. But yeah, to get them out of these screws and stuff, I'd say it's about time I buy some new hose clamps.
Yeah.
I think he went on a mission one day to buy them, but
I didn't find the ones I wanted. I was going to get the kind that had the removable heads, but you could customize the length.
yeah,
But I wasn't able to find that
those
right
are
combination.
too complicated for me.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so I've glued on the first maybe 5 veneers.
Let's take a look at this. So they look like they're pretty happy and wrapped around there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and this end is a little rough because it doesn't matter, it'll be under the fretboard, right?
Yeah.
So what's next?
So I'm going to wrap around this herringbone. I just pre-bent it, but I need to measure exactly where it's going to go. So,
Look how slick that's going to be.
let's see. I need.
So you got to mark where to cut it. Okay.
Right up there.
Good.
I made way too much.
Yeah, maybe some deserving guitar apprentice would like to have that.
I don't know what you can do with it, but
Yeah, well, me neither. That's why I'm the apprentice and you're not.
you could make a. So that's ready to go.
You've cut it on the bandsaw. It's shorter now. It's ready to wrap. You're going to put some glue on it.
Blob on some glue.
And you like to put lots of glue on.
Yeah.
This is making a lot of people faint.
Why?
Well, because a lot of woodworkers put just exactly the right amount of glue on, and you know they don't go for all this squeeze out. But you have a different viewpoint on that.
Look at that, perfect.
Couldn't be better.
Yeah, I like squeeze out. I don't like a starved joint. In guitar making, if you have a starved joint, that's like a disaster.
Yeah, maybe it's time for some new clamps.
Yeah,
But these work. I mean, you know,
they still work.
they're long.
After probably, literally, I'm not kidding, 20 years I've had these.
So these are well seasoned.
Yeah,
They're broken in.
broken in. I do soak them. I do boil them occasionally in a pot of hot water
Uh-huh.
to get all the glue off and stuff. Okay.
Okay, so that's the next step. So what is the next thing you're going to do? You're going to take this and bake it, or put more veneer on, or what?
Yeah, I may bake this a little bit, and then, first I'm going to clean it off, and then I'll bake it in the oven and let it cool off, just because it dries faster
Okay, right.
at this point. And also we have this herringbone, and it'll heat up, and it'll, when it cools down, it stays nice and stays in there.
It'll be attached.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll just let you go clean it up, and we'll pick up after you've baked it.
All right.
Okay, so what we have here is the heater.
Side bender, and I'm bending the middle motif. I glue these to a. How close is that?
That's good.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm bending this to like about the same diameter.
So this completely eliminates the need for little wedges. Let me come in close and just take a look at how intricate this is and how you can bend the whole thing just like that.
Well, you can bend it if you put on a backing. You glue it on a backing piece of
Yes.
veneer, and this is kind of rather thick veneer,
Uh-huh.
bordering that motif.
So this is all put together with Gorilla Glue, yeah?
No, this is Type-On, because we want to heat it up and have it
You
have
want
it
this to move.
malleable,
Okay.
malleable.
Okay.
And so this bends very easy because all these little tiles
You kind of slip and
are
slide.
heated up, and they slip and slide, and and you just kind of hold it until it cools down,
Uh-huh.
and and then I'm just waiting for this to dry. I just took it out of the oven.
You've put some more veneer rings around the outside, and you're waiting for it to dry, and then you're going to put this on top of that.
And I put this here.
Right. So
And that means we're exactly halfway done. on
halfway
this.
done, because that middle motif is the center.
Yeah. So I'll have it.
This is going to be spectacular.
I'll have it finished by this evening. You won't be around.
No, I won't. But
But,
at least we can get a little glimpse of how this is going together.
I'll put it up on Facebook.
Okay, fantastic.
So, how I cut these out is first I glue these onto a piece of wood like so. And the reason is that you can't put this thing through the bandsaw. It'll twist it and it'll break your blade and it'll destroy this. So you need a stabilizing thing. So this will run at the bottom of the bandsaw and this will run against a guide. So, and it's going to be glued with good old-fashioned crazy glue.
And you have about a 1/2 inch beneath the running surface right there.
Yeah, anything will work, but
just
you know,
need
a
it
little
to
bit
be-
more clearance.
You need it just to be above the floor
Yeah,
or the bed of the
yeah, of the
bandsaw.
yeah. So I just kind of spot glue this just enough to hold it. Little accelerator on this side. And good to go. Other side. A little thick, but I'd rather be conservative than too thin, but I think I'm going to thin it a little bit. So, how's that? So then I sand this flat on the surface sander. I'm going to go a little thinner. Maybe get like this angle looking up.
Okay, ready? Go.
Yeah. Very nice. Maybe put it in this angle.
Now hold it on the edge. I'm trying to show how thin it is.
Huh?
I'm trying to show how thin it is. Okay.
Okay, I just cut up the cylinder and I was able to get 10 rosettes. I have to pry this one off here. If you're lucky, this pops right out if you've used the right amount of wax so it doesn't stick to it. So looks like everything's okay.
That's gorgeous and amazing.
Yeah.
Let's spread them all out.
Well, there. Now the important thing to do immediately is to level these rosettes because they will start to warp and twist as they dry, and if they're uneven, they're a horror show. So the next step is to sand them on the sanding disc downstairs quickly before they start to dry out too much, because you know these were soaked with glue and water, and inside they're wet, still quite damp. So okay. So this is one of the best tools I have.
What's it called?
A sanding disc.
Sounds very technical.
You can call it what you want. It has sandpaper on the bottom and it spins around. Okay. We're done. Perfect thickness.